Welcome to Mr. Disturbing. Tonight, we're plunging into the dark heart of the Appalachians with some truly unsettling true horror stories. That'll keep you up all night. If you're brave enough, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next descent into fear. My name is Daniel Hurst. I am 41 years old. I was born and raised in eastern Kentucky in a small town called Whitesburg, tucked into the folds of the Appalachian Mountains. My profession isn't glamorous. I work for a small independent land survey firm. Most of my days are spent hiking through rough country, charting property lines, recording natural features, sometimes staking out long-forgotten plots deep in the woods. It's quiet work, isolated. I'm often alone for days at a time. That was always fine by me. I never minded the stillness of the mountains. I've known these woods since I was a boy, or at least, I thought I did. The job that changed everything came in late October, 2 years ago. A local coal company had bought up a large section of undeveloped land on the far side of Black Hollow, about 20 miles past the last county road. They wanted us to survey it before starting exploratory work. The place had a reputation, even among the older surveyors. Folks called it Dead Man's Parcel. A string of owners over the decades had either abandoned it or vanished outright. No one lived out that way anymore. The old homesteads had long since rotted into the ground. I didn't believe in ghost stories, but I'll admit the name stuck in my mind. Still, it was good money, and the job seemed simple enough. 3 days out in the field, mark the boundaries, shoot some coordinates, hike back. I packed my gear, maps, a GPS unit, extra batteries, a tent, food for a week, and drove out alone. The first day went smoothly. The forest was dense but beautiful, awash in the reds and golds of autumn. I camped by an old logging road, near a stream. The second day was when things began to feel wrong. The woods were too quiet. Not the normal hush of autumn, but a heavy, smothering silence. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to die between the trees. The deeper I hiked into Black Hollow, the more the forest seemed to close in around me. The terrain grew strange. The ground sloped in impossible ways, as if the land itself was warped. My compass spun wildly. The GPS refused to lock onto any satellites. I marked my progress by hand, using flagging tape and notes. That evening, while setting camp, I noticed something odd. Small, crude figures hanging from the trees. Bundles of twigs bound with old thread, shaped like little men or animals. They were everywhere, dozens of them, swaying in the still air. I assumed some eccentric hiker had left them, maybe a prank. But the thread was rotted with age. Some of the figures had moss growing through them. They'd been there for years. I slept uneasily, rifle close at hand. The third day was worse. I found an old stone wall deep in the forest, half buried and covered in ivy. It wasn't on any map. Beyond it stood what remained of a cabin, little more than a chimney and a few broken beams. Around the site, the trees were dead, their bark blackened and split. The air smelled of iron and ash. I felt watched, though I saw nothing. That's when I noticed the footprints, bare human tracks in the cold mud, too large, the toes long and crooked. They circled the cabin ruins and led off into the trees. Against my better judgment, I followed. The prints grew deeper, heavier, as if whatever made them was gaining weight with each step. The trail ended in a clearing. At the center was a pit ringed with stones. Bones lay scattered inside, deer, raccoon, some unidentifiable. Among them were small carvings, stone faces worn with age, their mouths open in silent screams. I took one photo before my phone died abruptly. No warning, no battery drain, just dead. I turned to leave. That's when I heard it. A faint voice, distant, genderless. It said my name. Once. Clear as day. My blood ran cold. I fled the clearing, flagging tape forgotten. The forest seemed different now, paths twisted in unfamiliar ways. Landmarks vanished. I moved fast, but the woods moved faster. Dusk fell too quickly. I made camp again, too exhausted to keep going in the dark. That night, I dreamed of faces in the trees, watching with hollow eyes. I awoke to find fresh footprints circling my tent. No sound, no sight of who or what had made them. The forest was no longer just forest. It was something alive, and it knew I was there. I broke camp before sunrise, eager to be gone from that cursed hollow. The forest was shrouded in thick mist, the trees pale and skeletal in the dawn light. My every step seemed to echo in the stillness. The normal sounds of the wild remained absent. No birds, no squirrels, not even the rustle of falling leaves. It felt as though the entire forest was holding its breath. I tried to retrace my steps, using what little remained of my marked trail, but the land had shifted. The gullies ran in new directions. Familiar ridges vanished. My compass remained useless. The GPS was still dead. I moved by instinct alone, heart pounding, breath quick and shallow. Every few minutes I glanced over my shoulder. The feeling of being followed had grown unbearable, and then I saw them, figures between the trees, half seen, pale and thin. They moved oddly, their motions jerky and unnatural, as though the forest itself was dragging them forward. Each time I looked straight at them, they were gone. But when my gaze drifted, they appeared again in the corner of my vision. Dozens of them, always watching, always waiting. I pushed harder, stumbling through undergrowth, tearing my clothes on briars. Hours passed in a haze of fear and disorientation. The forest grew darker, though it should have been midday. At one point I heard voices, low, chanting. The words were garbled, foreign, thick with age. They rose and fell in rhythmic waves. I covered my ears, but the sound seemed to vibrate inside my skull. Then, silence. I stumbled into another clearing. At its center stood an ancient tree, larger than any oak I'd seen in these mountains. Its bark was black, twisted, its limbs reaching skyward like skeletal arms. Around its base were stone markers, crudely carved, their surfaces covered in strange symbols. Bones hung from the branches on strings of sinew, clacking softly in the still air. My skin crawled. I backed away slowly. As I turned, I caught sight of something worse. A figure, impossibly tall and gaunt, standing among the stones. Its face was obscured, a mass of matted hair and shadow. Long fingers ended in jagged nails. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The figure raised one arm, slow as death, and pointed toward me. The chanting returned, louder now, coming from all directions. Panic overtook reason. I fled, crashing through the woods, heedless of direction. Branches tore at my face, roots snared my feet. I ran until my legs failed me. Collapsing by a stream, I gasped for air. The chanting faded, replaced by another sound. Laughter, not human, deep, hollow. It echoed through the trees, following me. I forced myself to stand and keep moving, every sense on high alert. Dusk fell again far too soon. The forest seemed to fold in on itself, narrowing into a tunnel of gnarled limbs and bramble. The air grew colder with each step. At last, through the gloom, I glimpsed an old hunting shack, weathered but intact. Salvation, perhaps. I forced the door open and stumbled inside, bolting it shut. The interior was musty, cluttered with old tools and rotted supplies. But it was shelter. I dared not light a fire. Instead, I crouched in a corner, knife in hand, listening. The laughter came again, fainter this time, circling the shack. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, crunching the dead leaves outside. They stopped by the door, a long silence, then 3 soft knocks, deliberate, slow. The air inside the shack grew thick, each breath a struggle. My vision blurred. Sleep pressed down on me, heavy and unnatural. I fought it, but my body betrayed me. In my last moments of consciousness, I saw a pale face at the window, eyes black as coal, lips twisted in a silent scream. Then, darkness. I awoke in full daylight, lying alone on the shack floor. The air was still and cold. The door remained shut. No sign of footprints outside, no faces at the window, just empty forest. My watch was broken. My phone, dead. I had no way of knowing how long I'd been there. Minutes, hours, days. My memory was clouded, pieces missing. But the fear remained, deeper now, etched into my bones. I forced myself to stand and leave the shack. The forest felt different in the light, no less oppressive, but quieter. I began walking again, driven by sheer will. The land seemed less twisted now, the ridges and streams more familiar. After endless hours, I emerged onto an old fire road, abandoned but recognizable. Relief surged through me. I followed it for miles, until at last I reached my truck, parked and undisturbed at the trailhead. I left that place without looking back. The job was forgotten, the survey unfinished. I filed no report, told no one. But the forest had not finished with me. Even now, months later, I hear the voices sometimes, faint but insistent, calling me back to Black Hollow. And in my dreams, I still see that pale face at the window, waiting, watching. I fear it always will. Weeks passed after I left Black Hollow, but the forest never truly let me go. Back in Whitesburg, life moved around me as if nothing had changed. But I had changed. Sleep was elusive. When it came, it brought dark dreams. Endless woods under a blood-red sky, the chanting, the pale faces between the trees. I woke each morning drenched in cold sweat, pulse racing, breath shallow. During the day, strange things began to happen. Tools disappeared from my garage, only to reappear days later in odd places. My phone would ring at odd hours, though no number showed on the screen, only static on the line. Once, while hiking near the edge of town, I found fresh footprints in the mud, bare, long-toed, just like those in the hollow. They led nowhere, vanishing mid-stride. Friends noticed my unease. I grew withdrawn. Avoided conversation. The forest called to me, subtle at first, a whisper on the wind, a flicker of shadow at the corner of my vision. Then stronger. One night, the call became unbearable. I packed a bag with supplies and drove alone toward Black Hollow. I don't remember making the decision. It was as though something inside me had already chosen. The road was empty, the sky moonless, the air thick with dread. I reached the trailhead by dawn. The forest greeted me in silence, the trees dark silhouettes against a gray sky. I hiked deeper, each step heavier than the last. The paths were clearer now, as though guiding me. The figures returned, glimpses of pale forms behind the trunks, always out of reach. The chanting began once more, low and distant, growing louder as I approached the old clearing. The ancient oak still stood, unchanged. The stone markers seemed newly carved, sharper. Bones swayed from the branches, and there, standing among them, was the tall figure, waiting. Its face remained obscured, but its presence filled the air with crushing weight. It raised one hand slowly, beckoning. Against all reason, I stepped forward. The chanting swelled, surrounding me, drowning thought. As I reached the tree, a deep voice echoed within my mind, not in words, but in pure intent. You are chosen. You are bound. A cold rush swept through me. The world spun. When I awoke, I was lying in the clearing. The forest was silent again. The figure was gone. The sun hung low, hours lost. My body ached, but I felt different, marked, claimed. I stumbled back through the woods, reaching my truck as night fell. I drove home in a daze, mind clouded. The following days were a blur. Food tasted of ash. The air felt heavier. When I looked in mirrors, my reflection seemed wrong. The eyes too dark, the skin too pale. At night, shadows gathered in the corners of my home. The voices whispered ceaselessly. I no longer trusted what I saw. Sleep offered no refuge. And then, 3 nights ago, I found something new. A crude figure, made of twigs and bone, hanging on my front porch. Old thread bound it tight. It swayed, though there was no wind. Since then, the pull has grown unbearable. Even now, as I write this, I feel it drawing me back. My pack is ready. I know I will return to Black Hollow soon. I cannot resist. I do not know what awaits me there. I only know that I am no longer my own. The forest watches. The forest waits. And when I go back this time, I do not think I will be coming out again. My name is Travis Elkins. I'm 36 years old. I live in Elizabethton, Tennessee, a small town pressed against the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I'm a wildlife photographer. For the last 12 years, I've made my living hiking through the most remote parts of the Appalachians, capturing images of black bears, bobcats, elk, and the raw beauty of these old mountains. I've always loved the solitude. I've spent weeks alone in the woods, camping in deep hollows far from any road or trail. I thought I understood these mountains. I thought I respected them. But last year, something happened that made me realize I didn't know them at all. It was late October when I received a tip about an area called Red Creek Basin. It wasn't on any modern maps. An old local hunter mentioned it one evening at a bar. He said the basin was hidden past a ridgeline north of Roan Mountain, near the Tennessee-North Carolina border. He claimed no one had hunted there in decades, that the wildlife was untouched, abundant, but that it was also bad ground. When I asked what he meant, he just said, "Some places the mountain don't want you." I thought it was just superstition. I couldn't resist the lure of unspoiled land. I spent a week researching old survey records and found a vague reference to Red Creek Basin on a deed from the 1940s. I plotted a rough course on my GPS, packed my gear, and drove out before dawn one chilly morning. The hike in was grueling. The forest grew denser the deeper I went, old-growth timber towering above me, their roots thick and gnarled. The trail vanished after a few miles, leaving only animal tracks and faint game trails. The climb over the ridgeline was treacherous, loose rock and slick leaves underfoot. By late afternoon, I reached the rim of the basin, and it was breathtaking. The land below was a vast hollow, choked with crimson maples and towering hemlocks. A narrow creek wound through the center. The air smelled of moss and earth. I set up camp on a rise above the creek and spent the first day photographing deer and birds that showed no fear of humans. But even as I worked, I felt something off. The woods were too quiet. The wind seemed to die completely once I entered the basin, and the light faded quickly, even though my watch said it was only 3 in the afternoon. That first night, as darkness swallowed the forest, I heard movement outside my tent, slow, heavy footsteps. I unzipped the flap and shone my flashlight into the trees. Nothing. No eyeshine. No animals. just the oppressive dark. The second day, deeper in the basin, I discovered something strange. High in a clearing stood several massive stone pillars, ancient and weathered, partially buried in the earth. They were covered in lichen and carved with faint spiral patterns. I had never seen anything like them in these mountains. I snapped photos, heart racing. It felt wrong to be near them. The air grew colder the closer I approached. My GPS refused to work, the screen flickering with static. I heard faint sounds behind me, soft voices, distant, like someone murmuring just beyond the trees. I spun around. No one was there. That night, the voices grew louder. They circled my camp, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, the words dry and hissing. I stayed awake with my camera and flashlight ready, but nothing showed itself. At dawn, I found large footprints circling the tent, humanoid, but wrong. The toes were too long, the gait uneven. They led toward the creek, then vanished mid-step. I should have left. I knew it in my gut. But something compelled me to stay. Curiosity, obsession, or something deeper. The third day, the forest seemed to shift. Trails I had marked with tape were gone. Familiar landmarks were changed. I began to lose track of direction and time. I stumbled upon an old campsite. Rusted cookware and torn canvas decaying into the soil. It looked abandoned for decades. But nearby, in the dirt, was a set of fresh footprints, large, bare, leading into the shadows. The air grew colder. My breath misted though the sun was high. I felt watched. Every snap of a branch or whisper of wind made me flinch. That night I heard something breathing outside the tent. Slow, deep, steady. My flashlight caught a glimpse. A figure crouched at the edge of the clearing, too thin, too tall, pale skin stretched tight over long limbs. Its eyes reflected nothing. When I blinked, it was gone. The forest fell deathly silent. I lay frozen until dawn, unable to move. When light finally returned, I packed what I could and tried to hike out. But the forest had changed. Paths led in circles. The ridgeline was gone, swallowed by dense mist. The deeper I moved, the more the woods closed around me. The voices followed. The pale figures appeared more often, at the edge of sight, always retreating when I looked directly at them. The basin had become a trap, and I realized, too late, that some places the mountain don't want you to leave. I don't know how long I wandered that day. Hours, maybe more. My watch had stopped. My phone battery, full the night before, was now drained completely. The forest pressed closer with each step, the mist growing thicker, clinging to my skin, seeping into my lungs. The silence was unbearable. Even my own footsteps seemed muted, swallowed by the earth. Once, I thought I heard running water and followed the sound, hoping it was the creek, but the source was something else. A small spring bubbling up beneath the roots of a massive blackened tree. The water smelled of rust and decay. Around the base of the tree were more of those spiraled carvings, deeper here, fresher, and bones, countless small bones, bleached white, some human. I turned away, heart hammering. The whispers followed, growing louder, urgent. They called my name now, soft and sibilant, threading through the mist. Travis, come, see. I ran, panic rising. Branches clawed at my face and arms. The land seemed to warp beneath me, gullies where none had been, ridges twisted and unfamiliar. More than once I stumbled upon those ancient stone pillars, though I had been moving in a different direction entirely. The forest would not let me go. Exhausted, starving, and terrified, I finally found an old logging road, overgrown but passable. Hope surged. I followed it for what felt like miles, pushing through brambles and fallen limbs. The voices faded. The mist thinned. But as dusk approached, the forest grew strange again. The trees leaned inward, their trunks black and slick. The air grew colder. I smelled smoke, faint, acrid. And then I saw it, a light ahead, flickering orange through the trees. Against my better judgment, I approached. In a clearing stood a crude wooden structure, half collapsed, its roof sagging. A small fire burned in a stone ring out front, though no one was there. Strange symbols were carved into the logs. Animal bones dangled from the eaves, clicking softly in the windless air. I wanted to run, but exhaustion pinned me. I crept closer. The fire was hot, too hot. The flames blew at the core. Shapes moved within it, shadows of things that should not be. As I watched, something stirred inside the cabin, a slow, deliberate shifting as if something massive was waking. Fear gripped me. I turned to flee, but found the clearing ringed with figures. Pale, emaciated, tall and thin with black pits where eyes should be. They swayed gently, heads cocked, limbs twitching in jerky spasms. They blocked every path. The chanting began again, low and rhythmic, filling the air with a palpable pressure. My vision blurred. My ears rang. I stumbled backward, falling to my knees. The air seemed to thicken, every breath a struggle. The tallest figure stepped forward, impossibly tall, gaunt, its skin stretched tight over bone. It raised a long, thin finger and pointed to the cabin door. A command, a summons. I could not resist. My body moved of its own accord, each step slow and dreamlike. The door creaked open as I neared. Inside, the darkness was absolute. But I stepped through. The air grew cold as ice. The chanting faded, replaced by a deep, resonant hum. The door slammed shut behind me. In the darkness, something breathed, vast, slow, ancient. I felt it, more than heard it, a presence beyond comprehension. Words formed in my mind, though no voice spoke them. You entered unbidden. You are bound. You will serve. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Images flooded my vision. Endless forest under blood-red skies, stones marked with spirals, rivers of bone beneath the earth, and faces, countless pale faces staring from the trees. Mouths open in eternal silent screams. Then, nothing. When I awoke, it was daylight. The cabin was gone. The clearing was empty. No fire, no bones, no footprints. Only forest, still and silent. My pack lay nearby, untouched. My camera, strangely, was missing. I staggered to my feet, numb with fear. The logging road remained. This time, it led true. After hours of stumbling through the woods, I emerged at the base of Roan Mountain, near a trailhead where hikers sometimes parked. My truck was gone. My clothes were torn, my body bruised. I hitched a ride to town, disoriented, barely able to speak. I told no one what happened. Who would believe me? But I knew one thing. I had not escaped. Something had marked me, bound me. The whispers continued, faint but insistent, even in the safety of my home. At night, I dreamt of those pale figures, of that cabin in the clearing, of the ancient presence in the dark. I began to see spiraled symbols etched into places they did not belong, beneath my desk, inside my closet, even scratched faintly onto my skin. The pull to return grew stronger each day. I fought it, but the forest called. The basin wanted me back. And deep down, I feared that the next time, I would not return. I lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of fighting the pull, of hearing those voices in the night, of finding spiraled symbols burned into my dreams and drawn, somehow, by my own hand while I slept. Friends stopped calling. Family grew distant. I lost interest in my work. The camera stayed in its case. I hardly ate. I barely slept. Each night, the dreams grew stronger. The basin, the pillars, the pale figures in the mist, always calling me back. One cold December evening, I found my boots and gear laid neatly by the door, though I had not touched them. A map was pinned beneath one boot. A map of the old basin, hand-drawn, marked with those spirals. The path to the clearing traced in ink. My hands shook. My mind screamed to resist, but my feet moved of their own accord. By dawn, I was driving east toward Roan Mountain, the truck moving as if guided. I told myself I would not go in, that I would turn back. But the moment I stepped from the truck, I knew I would not. The path was clear now. No GPS, no map. The forest welcomed me, opening before my steps. The ridgeline posed no challenge. The mist embraced me like an old friend. The basin had changed, darker, colder. The trees blackened as though burned, though no fire had touched them. The pillars stood taller, the carvings deeper. The creek ran red with rust. The air hummed with unseen voices. The clearing awaited. And there, the cabin had returned, whole, waiting. Pale figures circled its edge, swaying gently, heads bowed. As I entered, the air grew cold as death. The door closed behind me. In the darkness, the presence stirred, vast, timeless, inhuman. I felt it wrap around me, through me. Words filled my mind. You are home. You are bound. You will serve. Time lost meaning. I remember flashes. Endless woods beneath crimson skies. Myself walking the basin, pale-skinned, eyes dark, part of the forest now. I remember other faces, other voices, lost ones who had come before, who had not left. I understood then. Red Creek Basin does not release its own. It hungers, it binds, it remembers. When I awoke again, I was outside the basin, lying on cold ground near my truck 3 days later. My clothes were torn, my skin marked with faint spiral scars, my memory blurred. But something had followed. The whispers remained. The faces returned, not just in dreams now. Reflections in windows, shadows in corners, flickers in the camera lens. Wherever I went, they watched. I left Tennessee, moved west, changed my number, burned the old maps. But the call persists. Some nights I wake with my boots on, keys in hand, halfway to the door. The basin wants me back. The mark cannot be removed. And I know, one day soon, when the voices grow too strong to resist, I will return. I will walk the old paths again. And this time, I will not come out.